Esther McVey.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And first, can I congratulate the Honourable Member for Broxtowe for her maiden speech and her personal story too. And thank the Deputy Speaker for calling me in today's budget debate on fixing the NHS and reforming public services. The truth is, however, that this smash and grab of a budget on UK's businesses will mean the money won't be there to pay for the excellent public services the country requires. The issue is, Labour has never understood the concept that it is private enterprise and businesses that pay for public services, and that it is only with a thriving private sector that the country can have the public services it wants and it needs. Make no mistake, this budget will be catastrophic for the economic health of this country. It is the biggest tax-rising budget in British history, and it will turn out to be the longest suicide note in Labour's political history too. The budget is socialism at its worst. High taxes, high spending and massive debt. They're laughing, but this is massive debt for future generations to come. This budget is anti-business, anti-farmer, anti-aspiration, anti-wealth creation and anti-worker. Yes, Madam Deputy Speaker, anti-worker, despite all of Labour's promises not to tax workers before the general election. They are, as they raise national insurance contributions for employers, which I have to say begs the question, does the Chancellor and the Prime Minister not know how the economy works? They certainly don't know how business works. Not one of the current bunch of Cabinet Ministers has ever set up a business. No wonder they don't have a clue about national insurance contributions. But for clarity, both the Independent Office for Budget Responsibility and the Institute for Fiscal Studies have come out to say 80% of these employer national insurance rises will be paid for by the workers through lower wages and reduced employment levels. No wonder they've gone silent listening now. And the Chancellor's raid on the unfairest tax of all, inheritance tax, will double the number of estates which have to pay it, and disgracefully will virtually make it impossible for family farmers to pass on their business to the next generation. Farmers are most definitely working people, just in case those on the opposite benches, the Labour benches, don't know. This budget will be disastrous for our rural areas and for the country's food security, and all because of good old-fashioned socialist envy. No, I'll carry on. Thank you very much. And in addition to huge tax rises, the impact this budget will have on the country's debt is eye-watering. Debt interest payments will be more than £100 billion each year and every year, and will reach an astonishing £120 billion by the end of the decade. To put that into context, I will carry on for a little bit longer. To put that into context, it dwarfs the UK's annual defence spend, which stands at £55 billion. This is money being wasted instead of being spent on public services. And if all that wasn't bad enough, the Office of Budget Responsibility has downgraded the growth forecast to a measly 1.5% for the years running up to the next general election. So much for Labour saying this was going to be a budget of growth. This budget from Labour has taken our country back to the 1970s with crippling taxation, unsustainable levels of borrowing and the trade unions in control. It has also broken virtually every single economic promise Labour made during the election. In fact, maybe even worse than the economic misery this budget will bring is the further mistrust in politicians this will cause. For Labour ruled out tax hikes on working people more than 50 times and ruled out changing the fiscal rules to fiddle the figures. Mark my words, on top of the betrayal of pensioners with the scrapping of the winter fuel allowance, this budget will be a nail in the coffin for this government, only 4 months after securing a huge majority. In closing, I know at the weekend the Chancellor eventually came round to admitting Labour will be taxing workers, but I'm afraid saying it now, whilst denying it at the general election, does not wash, and it is way too late to be admitting it. All it has done is expose the fact that this Labour government was elected on a false premise and does not therefore have a mandate for this budget. Laughing while telling the public not what you are going to do, I'm afraid, is why I certainly will not be supporting this budget.